There is no Keyser Soze.
Keaton always said, I don't believe in God, but I'm afraid of him. Well, I believe in God. And the only thing that scares me is Keyser Soze. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
Hello and welcome to episode 29 of We'll Review It Our Shelves, the podcast where we review the movies on our shelves. Every 2 weeks we'll take a randomly selected movie from our collection and we'll review it ourselves. I'm still Brian Morgan, and you're still...
Dan Bergman, but your guess is as good as mine.
Oh, well, the solipsist in me, I can't know that you exist. I can only know myself.
All right, do you really want to ride this train?
No, not really.
Okay.
just that far. Just that we got off the next stop. It was like,
Then he can go about his business. Move along. Move along.
Okay.
Move along.
Move along. These are not the podcasters you're looking for. Yes, we are. Yes, we are, in fact, the podcasters you're looking for. Episode 29. You know what that means.
We've done 28 before this.
Yes, that's exactly what it means.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You want answers? I got them.
All right. So let's go to our listener feedback before we start talking about the usual suspects. And on that, we have received listener feedback regarding our Tombstone episode. And
I
that
read
was
this one. I if you were going to read the one from Jeff, I kind of laughed at that one. Cause...
yes, it's the only feedback we've gotten, so I do kind of have to read it. And it is from Jeff Edwards, one of our apparently our favorite listener, because listeners we're not getting a whole lot of feedback except from Jeff, and we love Jeff, but we want to hear from other people as well, just to get a different take on things. So even though Jeff does give us a different take on things, you know what I'm saying. Let's just work with that. All right, so. Jeff says, in regards to our Tombstone episode, you guys wander down some strange alleys, but that's often the best part of your podcast. Please keep them coming. And here we are, creating yet another episode where I suspect we will wander down the rabbit hole, because I know I've got a couple of things that made me think of other things that usually lead to rabbit hole wandering. So, that being said, that is all of our listener feedback, and we will provide you with ways to contact us at the end of this episode. So, Dan, I assume you own The Usual Suspects.
I do.
What version?
The MGM Special Edition, which, as far as Special Edition goes, I own the MGM Special Edition, which, as far as Special Editions, quote-unquote, goes, it's kind of standard. I mean, it has special features that are interesting, director commentaries, how it's made, and the storytelling. But, yeah, as far as the packaging, kind of lackluster. You're saying basic plastic case. The art, the artwork on is just the standard Usual Suspects lineup scene with the title. So, yeah, pretty standard fare.
That's pretty much what I have. I actually, to be honest, didn't look at the box to see if it was a special edition. I know that there's a director commentary track and the Spanish language, French language, English language, subtitles, and I think the original movie trailer. But this movie was made in 1995, again, when DVDs were just really starting to hit the streets, and special features were... Look, we can put extra stuff that you don't necessarily get on a video cassette. Yay, us.
To agree with you that, yeah, this was probably published in the era when, DVDs were really starting to develop. They were starting to bloom. And, calling it a special edition didn't quite have the same meaning as it does today. Like I said, this thing has the never-before-seen deleted scenes, Pursuing the Suspects featurette, Keyser Soze, Liar or Legend featurette.
Oh, yeah, mine didn't have any of that.
Yeah, Doing Time with the Suspects featurette, and I guess it's just, kind of showing off the ensemble cast. And there's actually a gag reel on this.
Oh. Okay. So, we'll come back to this little thought that I had going on. The only other thing that I wanted to add in regards to the DVD that I have, and I think I've mentioned this before on other episodes, I didn't have to flip this over in the middle, unlike some of the previous movies that we've watched, but this does have the letterbox version and the pan and scan version on each side.
I was about to say, yeah, this one is old enough that it gives you the choice of the widescreen or standard version to watch.
Now, which one did you watch? I assume the widescreen. Yeah.
Blasphemy even suggests that there would be other lines. If you were any other man, I would kill you where you stand.
So there were 5 lights. No, wait. Damn it. There were some lights. It's all good, man.
What lights?
I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, I have considered on occasion, just for the viewing difference, watching the not letterbox, but I just can't bring myself to do it because even before widescreen televisions were a thing, I always watched the letterbox or the widescreen edition.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's more what the theater brought you, so you see all the cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like everybody always used to get people who complain. It's like, well, I thought the black stuff at the bottom and the top of the screen. Because, way back when, my home theater was a 27-inch Sony Trinitron. And, man, that was hot. That was hot stuff back then, man. That was top of the line.
Yeah, did I tell you my Sony Trinitron story? You helped me when I bought my 32-inch Trinitron. We carried it in your old Ford Probe.
Yes.
And we drove it to my house, and we opened it up, and we put it in on the television stand, and it was wonderful, and it was amazingly heavy. I think that television weighed about 267 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
And I know this because I weighed it at one point in my life. So this is, again, a rabbit hole that I had not intended on talking about, but you brought up Trinitron, and it made me think of it. So that television, when I moved from San Diego to Norfolk, when the movers walked in to pack up my stuff, they looked at that and just sort of shook their heads and started looking down like, oh, God, I hate those things. And I kind of noticed it, and I said, something wrong? It's like, no, those are just the heaviest televisions of that size, and I hate moving them. I said, oh, sorry. So we take this television to Norfolk. It's the TV in the house, yada, yada, yada. And then we ended up moving to Millington, Tennessee. So we had the TV for a good, 10, 12 years or so. I mean, we had it for quite a while. And at one point, we bought a new television, which was just the high-definition version, upgrade of the same model. So it was a 32-inch television, but it had a flat screen. Not like the flat panel televisions that we have now, but the screen was flat. Mm-hmm. And it was high definition, up to, I think, 720. And while we were in Millington, we had to move from one Navy housing unit to another Navy housing unit because they were covering up the lead-based paint and taking out the asbestos tiles in the floor. So kind of thought maybe we should move while they did that. And we did. We moved ourselves. So in order to get paid to move ourselves, because it was a Navy-ordered move, and they paid us for like the rental trucks and stuff like that, we had to drive across the base to the scales, and we had to weigh the vehicle empty and then weigh it every time we went through with stuff in it. And just for kicks, I put just the television in there and drove across, and that's how I know that television weighed about 269 pounds.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I will say, I was kind of frustrated because not frustrated, I don't think that's the right word. I was shocked, I suppose, more so than frustrated. But when we bought that television and I had to get it onto the TV stand in San Diego when I bought the first version, I moved it all by myself. Now, probably unsafely because, heaven forbid, I am, for our listeners, I weigh about $160 soaking wet carrying a brick, and I am not particularly muscular, and I don't work out. But I took my bathrobe strap, belt thing, threw it around the back under where the CRT gun would be, and used that and sort of wiggled it into my hips, if you will, and sort of waddled over to the television stand, and that's how I got it onto the stand. I didn't need two people to carry that thing. I did it myself. Luckily, the TV survived.
It's like you talking that story, and, every time I move my television, I always remember there was an old B movie. It was The Adventures of Sinbad. It was a Ray Harryhausen vehicle, and a golden minotaur was one of the special effects, where he did the stop-motion animation.
Mm-hmm. I love those.
Yeah, and I just remember the scene where the Minotaur was moving a stone to open a door into the temple or something. I forget exactly what the context, but, he's got this big, huge stone block that he's pulling out, but then he steps off the ledge and the stone falls on him, destroys him, but I'm thinking, that's going to be me if I'm moving this television, I'm a big golden Minotaur and this stone is going to fall on me. And that's how people are going to find me with a big-ass television
with a big-ass television.
I
don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is now I have a 55-inch television that I can pick up by myself as long as I sort of lean it toward myself and just, wander around, and I think it weighs about maybe 50 pounds, if that. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I love television nowadays.
And pretty soon, with developing OLED and everything, you're going to have an 85-inch television that weighs as much as a poster.
That's so cool. Yeah. And about, $67,000, but whatever.
Well, no, they could get cheaper eventually, and you'll be able to roll it up into a poster tube and, move wherever you need to go.
I've actually seen some stories, articles about that technology, and they were using it, or saying, rather, that you could use it for like military maps and that sort of thing, where they just roll them out and plug it in, and bloop, there you go. There's your map, and it's touch screen and all that kind of stuff.
They've got proof of concept, and to me, that's always the exciting thing in developing technology is proof of concept, and that just means it's all downhill from there. And
because once you make it initially, then all you have to do is figure out how to mass produce it, and that's when the price starts coming down.
Yeah, work out the bugs and everything. Because right now, that's like the last article I read, the bugs are still keeping the elements in line when you roll it, because I guess they get misaligned when you bend the surface and everything. So yeah, it's a problem. They'll fix it. They always do. And, there's money to be made, so there's the motivation.
Yay, capitalism.
Mm-hmm. So to bring this round robin, okay, down. Probably not one
and
of the
talk about the usual suspects.
Yeah, not one of the darker alleys we've ever gone and everything. But there's always that question of how did this wind up on your shelf?
Yes.
Before I tell you how it wound up on mine, I want to say hear yours.
I'll be honest. I've had this movie for so long that I don't remember exactly how it ended up on my shelf. I know that I got it early on in my DVD movie collection. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before. I was never really into getting VHS movies. I don't know why. It just never really attracted me the way DVDs do. Mm-hmm. So I think this was probably in one of the first 10 or 15 DVDs that I ever bought. I don't remember specifically. I just remember that I liked the movie enough to think I need to watch this again. And to be perfectly honest, I don't pull this movie out very often because it shows up on television and I'll just sit and watch it. This, for me, is one of those movies that if it's on as I'm flipping through the channels, I'm like, and we'll stop. Let's just see. Okay, where are we again? All right, we're there. Okay, cool. And then kind of roll with it. So, yeah, I don't really have an exciting story about how it got there. I just remember that I wanted it and I bought it.
Yeah, here's my thing. At first when this got chosen and everything, and of course, like the first thing is like, how did it get on my shelf? And it's just one of those movies that I bought. And to tell you the truth, at the beginning, I kind of did not know why, because when I bought it, I hadn't seen the movie yet.
Oh, that's odd. I don't usually do that.
No, it's a relatively rare thing. I'm not going to say that I have very few. There is a number of movies that I have bought unseen. But a lot of those are, because friends of mine whose opinions I trust, because we have similar tastes and everything, they say, oh, Dad, you're going to love this movie. Then, yeah, I'll buy them sight unseen. Others are like Thor Ragnarok, which I didn't get to see in the theaters because, well, life happens. And But come on, it's Marvel Cinematic, you know.
Right.
It's like as if I didn't see Star Wars in the theater. Is there really a question that if I'm going to buy that on Blu-ray? You know,
Fair enough.
But this one was one of those cases where some friends told me this is a good movie, you should buy it. But then, you know, as I'm prepping for this particular podcast, it really got me thinking, and it just, I don't know if this is a term or, you know, if this is a thing, but it just made me think of the term movie pretentiousness. Because this movie was so critically acclaimed, and everyone's like, oh, this is such a great movie, and, you know, the phrase, who is Keyser Soze, kept getting thrown around, and everybody says, oh, the twist is awesome, and this and that, and everything. And so the thing is, if you were somebody who either didn't like it, or someone like me who didn't know much about it because he didn't see it in the theater, you know, it's like, we were the outcasts, you know, we just had to say, oh, well, yeah, I own it, you know, it's like, to save face, you know, so I'm ashamed to say, you know, but I mean, yeah, it's like, I think it was that pretentiousness that, you know, you want to be part of the group and say that, yeah, this is a great movie and I bought it. And it's not to say that it wasn't a good movie. I mean, I watched it and I found that it was a great movie, but, you know.
So let me ask you this. Would you attribute that to, for you, the desire to be a part of that club, if you will? Or is it more of a, hey, a lot of people have said this is really good and one day I will probably watch this, but I'm just going to buy it? Or is it more of the, when you say movie pretentiousness, it's sort of the, you want to be able to, I don't want to say look down on people, but hoist your nose and say, oh, I can't believe you don't own that movie.
You know, and that's the thing. Little column A, little column B, even C, D, E, and F.
Sure, okay.
And that's the thing. I mean, you know, when it comes to certain movies that I love, I mean, I love Blade Runner. And it doesn't matter if anybody else likes it. It just so happens that a lot of people do. It has a cult following. And, you know, it feels good when you got people that you can talk about it with.
Absolutely.
I like the movie Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
I don't know why.
Pretty much the minority in that, but okay, I like that movie because I like it. This one, it's just like I said, I hadn't seen it, and everyone else liked it, and so I felt I had to as well, to fit in. Yeah, as I grew up and matured, it's like fitting in is not all what it's cracked up to be, and sometimes fitting in is not the best way to go, but, I mean, lucky for me, this is a good movie. Is it the greatest that some people were saying? Maybe, maybe not. I like it. I like it enough to own it and maintain it in my collection.
Okay, so well, let me ask you that. And again, we're kind of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole about movie ownership in the first place, but we'll bring it back around. So when you own movies, do you get rid of movies that you don't like? I mean, you have 1,100, so that kind of opens up the door a little bit.
Yeah, there are a handful of movies that I don't own anymore that initially I liked because everyone else liked them. But then as I grew up and had different tastes or learned different things, I'll give you a prime example of a movie that I don't own anymore, and I'll tell you exactly why I don't, and that's Braveheart.
Okay.
We first saw it, you know, we thought, oh, this is a great action flick, and, you know, show those English what for, you know, and everything. And, yeah, it was a cool thing to agree with everyone. It's like, oh, Braveheart's a great movie, and, oh, yeah, I agree. But I already knew, like, in the beginning when people would talk about, oh, that really happened, or, you know, oh, yeah, they were doing this to him in the end torture scene and everything like that. And even part of me started thinking, is like, is that really what happened? Because I didn't know. I didn't know what was really happening, you know, but I mean, everyone seemed so sure of what they were doing to him and everything. So, yeah, I did some research, and again, I bring up Nick Hodges and History Buff's channel on YouTube, and he talked about it, the historical value of the movie, and he does not like Mel Gibson.
Yeah, it's not terribly historically accurate from what I understand.
Not at all. And at one point, when I forget the exact years, but they said the story takes place, or starts taking place, in 1 year, but it really took place in, like they say it took place in the year 1300, when actually it took place in 1308. And he's like, what, they couldn't afford a bloody 8 to just at least give the correct date?
Yeah, and that kind of stuff bothers me about movies that are supposed to be a historical representation of an actual event, and they're not. They're just somebody taking a story and modifying it to meet their own desires. Now, again, but that goes back to what we talked about in Tombstone. If you're learning your history from movies, then you might be doing it wrong.
Yeah, and it's not that I watched that movie to learn history. I mean, again, yeah, we're not learning history from the movies, but it is fun to look at a movie and say, "Oh, wow, they got that right. They got that right. Okay, I understand the clear." And the thing is, though, with Braveheart, it's like he didn't even try.
Yeah, I do expect a reasonable degree of accuracy.
Yeah. So there was that aspect. There was the aspect of who Mel Gibson is, or who we found out for him. His character, who he really is.
Okay.
I had a problem with that, and like I said, my taste changed. I just decided that that's not a movie I want in my collection. I can't watch it with the same eyes anymore. So
Okay.
I sold it to Amoeba.
Oh, very nice. Because for me, I have a hard time getting rid of the movies that I own, so even if I kind of start to not like the movie, I still keep it because I might find something redeeming about it at some point. And for me, it's kind of, I guess, worth having around just to flesh out the collection so I can say, yeah, I have some movies I don't like. And I'm sure as we go through all of the movies in our collections, we'll run across a few. You're like, ooh, yeah, I really don't know why I own this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have some movies that I own that Christy bought that I hadn't seen, a la A Company Man, which we were, our first foreign language movie that we reviewed. There's some that I don't know, I just haven't seen them yet. Because somebody will buy them and they'll end up in my house, and then I'll have to figure out a reason to watch it. But The Usual Suspects is not in that category. Like I said, I don't watch it often, but I do, pull it down probably once, I would say, every 5 to 7 years or so.
Well, here comes a nice segue, though, into the next question about this movie. And, I don't know if you can call this an elephant in the room or whatever, but, I said I stopped watching Braveheart and other Mel Gibson movies because we found out the type of person Mel Gibson is. Now, in light of recent events involving Kevin Spacey, do you think that was bad enough to make us view this movie any differently?
It's funny that you ask that because I asked Christy the same exact question when I started the movie, because I paused it and said, hey, let me ask you this. And I basically asked her that, and we both kind of agreed that while that colors our perception of the person, the actor, it doesn't change the fact that this is a good movie. I will say that doing some research for this episode, I found out a few things that I didn't know about, and some things that were indicative, I guess, or in hindsight, you could look back and go, oh crap, that's been going on for a while. One of the things that I found out was they halted production on this movie because Kevin Spacey had apparently, allegedly, inappropriately approached one of the younger men in the cast, and they sort of halted production, blah, 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 and then kept on going. When I found that out, that kind of changed the movie for me, because that was one of those, you knew this and you kept going. You knew this and you're just like, oh, poo-poo, we're making a movie, and, blah, 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 blah. That goes to that whole cover-up piece. So it makes me not like Kevin Spacey as much as a human being. Not that, once I heard about that stuff, I really cared for him. I feel weird saying this, but I still respect his acting. I mean, I thought he was brilliant in this movie. And apparently so did the Academy at the time, because he won a Best Supporting Oscar actor. Or Best Supporting Actor Oscar. Yeah, I can make words. Anyway, I don't know. That is such a complicated question.
It is a very complicated question, and and that's the thing. I mean, I compared again the whole Mel Gibson thing. And it's like, we found out Mel Gibson was anti-Semitic, sexist, and all this stuff and everything, and therefore I don't like his movies. No, it was also compounded that the movies that he made were actually not that good. So it's like the two things together made it easier for me to make the decision that Mel Gibson's not going to be part of my life anymore. Kevin Spacey, there's some transgressions and everything like that. And like you said, I can still respect the actor. Like we talked about in Tombstone, we can still respect Wyatt Earp for the deeds that he did, even though he had some flaws. A lot of flaws. Well, however you want to interpret it. I mean, it's like, was it the other argument I had with somebody else about the great things that Henry Ford did? Henry Ford brought the automobile to the common man. he brought about better working conditions for his workers because he knew happy workers were productive workers and everything. And it's like, yeah, what a great man who also happened to be very anti-Semitic. It's just like, oh, that's a tough one to get through, but still, you got to respect what the man did. His contribution did spread to everybody. So, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm giving him a pass.
And I agree. I'm not giving him a pass either, right? But I still appreciate this. And he's one person out of the 2,000 or 3,000 that it took to make this movie. So there's a part of me that's like, hey, Benicio del Toro did a great job in this until he died. Stephen Baldwin, one of the 47 Baldwin brothers that act.
One of the better ones.
Yeah, what was it? Stephen, Alec.
Isn't there a Daniel Baldwin? He was like the chunky one that was in From Dusk Till Dawn.
Ronnie, Bobby, Ricky,
he wasn't,
and Mike.
He wasn't in Dusk Till Dawn.
Oh, that's New Edition. My bad.
That's right. He wasn't in Dusk Till Dawn. He was in that James Woods vampire movie. God, what was that one?
Vampires?
Was it Vampires?
I think so.
Yeah, where James Woods was a vampire hunter and he was his partner. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what it was called. But yeah. So anyway, I mean, there's like 5 Baldwin brothers. They all act. This was one of Stephen Baldwin's better movies, in my opinion.
As opposed to Biodome.
Yeah. And this is, I think, one of the only movies that I've ever heard Stephen Baldwin quoted from. I know in Tombstone we talked about that being a very quotable movie, but I don't know that there's a lot of quotes in this movie that survived through the years that wormed their way into the social consciousness. But you will occasionally hear people say, Oswald was a fag, every now and again.
Yeah. Talking about quotes, though, and here's the thing. I mean, I tried to do some research, and I don't think it came from the Bible because I can't find anything. But, they says the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. And the thing is, like, yeah, a lot of people like to quote that, but they also attribute it to the Bible. And it's, no, that was the usual suspects. I mean, have you been able to find anything?
Actually, on the IMDb, yes, there's a lot of B's in there, whatever. Anyway, that line is a quote from the French poet, and I'm going to slaughter the name here, Baudelaire. From what IMDb says, apparently they didn't know that. So I guess the insinuation here is that they came up with it on their own, so I don't know. I
did find a site that does confirm it's not from the Bible, it's from the movie. They say it is good theology because they quote a Bible verse that reminds us that Satan is real. And they say, Paul warned, quote, even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light, so it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness, unquote. So, may influence or whatever, but point being, it's a, quotable line, but damn, people, it just gets so annoying when that's from the Bible. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
That's from the movie.
Taking that back just a little bit to the devil or Lucifer, pick your name for that entity, disguising himself as an angel of light and his followers doing the same. One of the things that I had written down in my notes, because this movie is about a lie. Mm-hmm. It's about Kevin Spacey crafting this fictional tale, and you don't really know at the end what's true and what isn't, except for the fact that all of those people are dead, and he's Keyser Soze. Sorry, spoilers. It's a
do you still play the warning that I recorded at the beginning of each podcast?
I do not. Sorry, if we're talking about a movie that's that was made in 1995.
That's what the announcement states. This movie was made. Yeah. These are old movies. They've been on DVD, so they're gonna have spoilers. They do it at the beginning of every Mythbusters. These are dangerous. Don't try this at home.
I think we'll be okay. Spoilers.
I feel so betrayed.
But getting back to what I was going to say, some of the best lies in the history of humanity are 90%, and that's just a number I grabbed, 90% truth. There's more truth in a good lie than there is lie. Because if you don't build that foundation, if you don't say, yeah, this is what happened, and then deviate, that's where you get into trouble. Pathological bald-faced liars are easy to spot. You're like, oh, yeah, that's totally wrong. The sky is green. No, it's not. But in this movie, he tells you a story about how they got together, how they committed X crime, how they committed Y crime, and why they were all brought together to commit Z crime. The things that he embellishes are the things that, one, buy him time to not keep telling his story, and two, frustrate Chaz Palminteri's character to divulge some other piece of information that they have so that he can clarify his story along the way, so that he can make it fit the facts that he's been given as opposed to just making it up whole cloth. The whole thing where he's looking at the bulletin board at the beginning of the movie, knowing obviously how this goes, and this is the first time I've really rewatched it from front to back in a good long time. The almost bored look on Verbal's face, Kevin Spacey, is pretty amazing from an acting standpoint because he does look bored. Like, it makes sense that if you're stuck in a room, you're going to look around and see what's in there. It doesn't foreshadow anything until you get to the end and you're like, holy crap, you just told me how all this stuff works. And now that you rewatch it, you're like, oh, and there's where that happened, and there's where that happened. And, when Chaz Palminteri's drinking out of his cup of coffee and he's looking up, well, he's sitting down and he's kind of hunched over, and Chaz Palminteri's in his line of sight, so you can't really tell what he's looking at. And all these little details come into play at the end when Chaz finds out what's going on. But on a rewatch, you start to see things and go, wow, I really appreciate what happened there. I really appreciate how well they hid that.
Yeah, you had asked me, if knowing the ending changes the rewatch, and I had this thing that I was gonna say. It's like, it really gives you an appreciation for the details, and it makes you wonder. It's like, wow, how come I didn't figure this out sooner? Because everything's right there in front of me. And it's always, people always ask me, is like, well, didn't you find it? Or it's like, how could people not find certain things or whatever? And it's like, well, you're not going to find something that you're not looking for. And that's the thing. When you're watching that movie, you have no idea where these are leading. So you're not looking at anything. You're not looking at the bulletin board. You're looking at the characters because you think that's where you're going to find it. I guess the short answer is like, how does knowing the ending change your rewatch and everything? It's where the aha moment is. Obviously, the first time you're watching it, the big aha moment was when you find out that Kevin Spacey is not crippled. He's not an idiot. He is the mastermind of all this. You're like, wow, that was so cool. The big twist at the end. Whereas now you rewatch it and you see like all the clues that should have told you what was coming up. And you're like, oh, there, yeah, that's where he gives it away. But no, I didn't notice it at first because it changes the aha moments. That's I think what the rewatch does too.
Yeah, and for me, it gives you a greater respect for the way the movie is put together.
Oh yeah, the crafting.
Yeah, so when you see the little things like him looking at the bulletin board, and it's just a thing that the first go around, not that you really thought about it, but like, all right, he's looking at the bulletin board. He's really just scanning the room, but it's one of those things that, like I said earlier, makes perfect sense. You're like, I'm stuck in a room, I'm just going to look around while I wait for someone to show up to talk to me. It's very innocuous, but it's incredibly indicative once you know how the story ends. So it gives you, like I said, a much greater appreciation for how the movie is put together and the process that the director had to go through, and the editors, I assume, because I'm sure they had different angles and different shots and stuff like that. But it gives you a respect for how all that worked. One of the things that I did find out during the research for this was edited on film as opposed to what was occurring in the mid-90s, which was that transition to digital. And the film editor was very specifically against working with digital because he thought it was lazy. So this was one of the bigger movies. It was a movie that was specifically edited the way it was because the film editor was like, no, I'm doing this on film.
I totally see this as a meme where you see the actual physical film splicer and saying, kids today will never know the editing nightmare that we had to go through. They're so spoiled nowadays,
They'll never understand how we had to make wheels and crap. I did want to go back real quick when we're talking about other things that didn't strike me on, if I recall correctly. I mean, who really remembers the first time you ever watched a movie and remember everything you felt at the time? But one of the things
Depends
that I
on the
probably... True. But one of the things I probably missed on the first go-around, and there's a couple of references in there, but very early on in the movie, and I forget the actor's name, the guy that plays the police officer. Not Chaz Palminteri, the other guy. the guy that was in Cheers, and that's the only thing I really remember him for.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Actually, yeah, wasn't there like a Cheers spinoff that he did or something, the Fratellis?
Yes. Yeah, with the tall blonde lady. But anyway, I digress. You digress. We digress. There's digression. Anyway, he walks up to Chaz Palminteri when he shows up at the precinct, when Chaz does. And he says, yeah, this guy's already 2 hours away from posting bail or whatnot, and he is protected from on high. It's like the Dark Lord, or the Prince of Darkness protects him. And it's almost like a throwaway line. It's one of those, this guy's got connections. I don't know who they are, I don't know what they are, but it's just sort of one of those dismissive, like, I don't know, we got to let him out on bail in 2 hours, and that sort of sets the scene for how much time they have to talk to him. But once again, it's one of those things where in hindsight, you're like, oh crap, and they're talking about Keyser Soze being the devil. You're like, yeah, you're setting me up. You set me up from the beginning.
It goes pretty much to what I said. Is like, you see all these clues. Sometimes they're spoilers. They're telling you right then and there what's gonna happen. But yeah, you're not looking for it. You're not expecting it, and yeah, when at the end of it, you're like, how did I not figure that out sooner? Because it really goes to something that I've been noticing a lot is that, when you got movies like this, or just any movies, and you're taking clues, and I don't know if it's a recent phenomenon or something like that, but just the proliferation of fan theories about what's going on in the movie that's unsaid. Who's related to who, and what's going to happen, and where's the last of the Infinity Stones and everything, and who is Rey's parents, and then it turns out none of them are correct. It's just...
I know, and I actually appreciated that. But
but
I kind of get where you're going with that, where we are watching movies differently now because of the influence of fan theories and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I guess then what it means for this particular discussion is, do you think filmmakers count on that for people to come up with all kinds of wildness, or to not see the obvious and just let it go, that way at the end they still will be surprised? Or do you think that's just good storytelling?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that if you're telling a good story, then you're going to do exactly what we talked about earlier. You're going to blend things so well into the background that they just seem like normal things. When I texted you earlier to sort of get you thinking about, does knowing the twist change the way you watch this movie, I used the example of The Sixth Sense. And that's one of those movies where everything is laid out in front of you the entire movie, and it's not until the end when you go, oh crap, yeah, they did that, and they did that, and that was there, and this happened, and there was never a point where this happened. So if you craft the right story, if you put it in the right order, and you make things seem innocuous, then yeah, you're doing the right things. And that's relying on the storytelling and the fact that people are looking for something to happen. Now, you used the Soul Gem and Avengers Infinity War and that sort of thing as another example. And I think in this day and age, with the super mega blockbusters, there is a certain degree of monitoring, if you will, the fan theories. So they can kind of make it something different. Oh, well, this is the most prevalent fan theory? Watch this. I think there's a little bit of that, and I appreciate that because I don't want a movie to be predictable. But I do, in the case of like Avengers Infinity War and stuff like that, I already kind of have an idea how it's going to end because I read stuff. But, there's also a formulaic property to those movies. You're like, well, generally the hero's going to win. Pretty sure everybody's going to win at the end of the first part of this movie or the second part. Obviously now it's the second part. But in the case of The Usual Suspects, this was the kind of movie that was not a movie event. It wasn't Star Wars The Phantom Menace. It wasn't The Empire Strikes Back, which, if you really go into the 90s, how many really, really big movie events were there? We had The Matrix in the late 90s, but that was kind of a surprise. That was one of those, like, this is interesting. And it did a lot better than it was expected to. But for the most part, the 90s were a lot of good movies, but there was not a whole lot of, we have to go see this at the theater, blah, 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 and do the thing, So I think that movie making then and movie making now have changed, especially in regards to smaller artsy films and mega blockbusters. I think you're going to find more like what The Usual Suspects does than in those smaller films than you do in the blockbusters.
Well, like I said, I agree that this was just good filmmaking, and the thing about the twists that I was considering that I was going to bring up though is that it didn't feel the need to use, and I like using this term, and I get to use it very often in a sentence, but the term of it didn't need a Deus Ex Machina, the God of the Machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it didn't require that, because I know there's a lot of movies where the story, you don't know where it's going, and they go a certain direction, and it's like, okay, we got to bring it back around. Okay, let's just give this guy a superpower or something like that, or let's just
magic thing.
Or let's just add this character that we didn't know was there or something like that, and it just pop out of nowhere. This one, everything was there. All the paints were on the palette, so every color that went onto the canvas, it made perfect sense.
Yeah, and sometimes they made little happy trees and little happy birds. No mistakes, just happy accidents.
Why are you invoking Bob Ross on this?
Because I like Bob Ross.
I do
He's
too.
A lot of fun.
Time and a place for everything. Read the room, Brian.
On a weird segue, he has experienced a great resurgence of late. His shows are on Netflix, and they're being watched, which is crazy. Yeah. But anyway,
and
back to this.
Memes abounding with him of him.
Oh yeah, I know. And it's awesome. I like it. Anything that promotes people to think creatively and do something a little relaxing, kind of like what we're doing. Yay, podcast. Yeah. But one of the things that I kind of want to bring this back to The Usual Suspects about and storytelling is a conversation that I had recently with a friend of mine who was discussing the way a thing is written and the way a person reads it can be entirely different and yet still be uniquely cool. So the line about protected on high by the Prince of Darkness, for example, that could have been written by the screenwriters as a, no, this should be delivered like, oh my God, he is protected on high by the Prince of Darkness, or something where it's supposed to be emphasized, and then as they're getting into the movie making process, and they go, wait, hold on, wait. No, just say, yeah, I don't know what's going on. This guy must have, some serious benefactors. He's protected by the Prince of Darkness. I got no idea. But he's in the room. Let's go talk to him and let's go find out what's up. Where again, it's that just nothing line that you don't pay attention to. And that, to me, is what the director brought to the plate, where he was able to go, yeah, no, that's the one we want. We want that. And we want to take this story or take that through because this lays that foundation for what we're going to do at the end.
Well, that's the beautiful thing of movie making that sets it apart from all other art forms, though, is that what you highlight, what you want people to know. I mean, you've spotlighted the delivery of lines as one of the things to show the audience of what's important versus what's a throwaway, or the deception. Well, here it is. I'm showing it to you, but you're not interested. But it's here. Might mean something. Maybe it doesn't. Again, with the crafting and everything, because the other thing I noticed in this was the beginning of the movie, where basically they're showing you the end of the movie, where the person who we're finding out is Keyser, because are we done, Keyser? He's lighting a cigarette with a gold lighter.
Yeah.
Okay. At the end, when Verbal, Kevin Spacey, is getting his property back from the police clerk and everything, and it was like 1 lighter gold. Oh, okay. Subtle. Doesn't mean anything. Like you said, doesn't mean anything, but the camera focus in the beginning and that throwaway line, that's the crafting. That's the thing I love, about movie making, is it's so complex just to make a simple scene. Hitchcock was a genius on that. It's just where everything depended on camera angles, how long a camera lingered, not just what line was delivered or what emotion was inflected, but who the actor was looking at when he delivered the line, or what he was looking at and everything. It's just like things in the room. All of that just lent to just building a scene, and it makes you wonder just how many elements are involved in just making a single frame of film. How do movies ever get made in the first place?
Yeah, I gotta say, and some directors are better at it than others, because you can watch movies and, like, whodunits or something, and you watch them spend an extra second and a half on an object on a mantle or on a coffee table. And we've talked about this before, where, they spent an extra half a second staring at that gun or staring at that book. Like, just pay attention to that. That's going to come back and be important later. And I personally like it better when it's not as detectable. I don't need you to stare for 3 seconds at the thing and go, this battery will be important later. Sorry, it just happened to be a thing on my desk. But more of a, in passing, like, oh yeah, there were keys on there. That's right, I remember that. Okay, cool, let's keep going. I like the subtlety, and I don't want to be fed the answers. I kind of like to be able to figure it out on my own. Mm-hmm. And one of the things about this movie is they feed you everything, and it's not until the end that they go, hey, remember all that stuff we did that you don't remember because we just slid right by it? Yeah, here it is again.
Here it is, you're not paying attention to. You paid $15 for this movie, you didn't pay attention to a bit of it.
That was the interesting thing about this movie. Like, I used The Sixth Sense earlier. One of the things that The Sixth Sense did that some people liked, some people didn't, was they do that full flashback sequence where they go back to all of the scenes where Bruce Willis could have interacted with a human and didn't, and all that kind of stuff that sort of puts everything in perspective in case you missed it. This movie does a very similar thing, but it does it differently, because the only parts that they really go back to are the nonsense parts that Verbal added. These are the things that, important or not, like the barbershop quartet thing, that was just babble. There was no reason for him to say that, other than to buy time, to move to the next thing. But when he put it together, it was like, oh.
Well, that's the thing. That was the other thing, though. They were important because they were part of the disguise. Because the thing is, they kept dismissing him as the cripple, as someone who just talks too much, and they didn't think he was that smart.
Yeah, well, that's how he got the nickname Verbal.
Yeah, and then it's like they said, talking about the barbershop quartet. It bought him time. It actually frustrates people when you hear things that you don't want to hear from them. So he's talking about his barbershop quartet, and it's like, look, that has nothing to do with this, man. It basically causes Chaz's character to kind of lose control. Not completely, but a little bit of it. Because he's frustrated. I don't want to hear about that, Because now Verbal has said, oh, I'm talking about this, and you are powerless to stop me, but, relinquish that little bit of control.
I was just going to say it goes to control, because Chaz no longer controlled the conversation. I want what I want, give me what I want. Damn it, why are you talking about something else? I'm in control here. Like, no, you're not.
Nope.
I am. And that was one of the things that I wrote down in my notes, not that specifically, but wanted to talk to arrogance, there's a point in the conversation where Chaz looks at it and says, look, I'm smarter than you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've got all of this figured out. I just want to hear it from you. And, again, the twist is, no, you're not. You haven't got it figured out. Now, to his credit, once he started wandering through the things on the bulletin board and started putting things together, he was like, holy crap. This is totally wrong. We need this guy back. But by then, it was too late.
Yeah, it was too late. So, come to a question, and now we'll talk about fan theories and just questions and stuff like that. And there was the scene at the end when he gets in the car. You find out, okay, he's Keyser Soze. He's not a cripple. He's not an idiot. He gets in the car, and the guy who he said was Kobayashi, whose identity we really don't know, but an associate of his. But that now brings into question, is he really Keyser Soze? And Kevin Spacey is just the personification of him? And that even the guy who supposedly could identify him just knows him because he's the front man? It just reminds me of the whole, thing with Revenge of the Sith, It's just like, there's always two there are, and it almost, and it's I'm trying to think, like, different movies where we think that the bad guy is the one who's calling the shots, when in actuality, there's somebody above him.
There's somebody else pulling the strings.
Pulling the strings and everything. So the thing is, like, I know nobody is ever, of all the things on YouTube and everything, nobody ever talks about that possibility that is the guy pulling the strings. And I wonder, what do you think about that? Because, I never thought of it until I watched it for this podcast and everything. And he gets in the car, they exchange a look. It's a subtle look, it's a throwaway look, but it's a look nonetheless. And we're talking about things where, we didn't notice before, and because I'm rewatching it, I pay a little less attention to the MacGuffins and the red herrings and everything, and I'm looking for other things. And I see that look, and I'm just like, huh, is he? Is that another layer that we just didn't really think about?
I don't think so. I think there's a desire in some people to make things more complicated than they really are.
Well, I got just one more thing to add to that, though. And it's like Kevin Spacey's telling this story, pretty much like you said, it's all bullshit with a foundation of truth. Certain things did happen, but most of it's bullshit. And he talks about an associate who speaks for Keyser Soze. You're telling a story based on things that you see, things that you know, where this part is true, but what he did is not. It's in other words, your lies are subtle. So he knows this
goes back to the foundation of truth.
Mm-hmm. So he knows his boss. He knows what his job is. So why not just switch those places and say that the things that I'm doing for him, that's him. In the story, in the movie telling part. Now, is any of this proof? No, I'm not going to say it's proof and everything, but I don't know. It gave me something to really think about, and I'm probably going to watch this about 2 or 3 more times to really kind of either say yay or nay on my part as to whether or not he wasn't really Keyser Soze. He was the ghost.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, and it's more of a, like, you think that's the guy when it turns out that's not the guy. It was like Iron Man didn't do it very well. Iron Man 3, rather, didn't do it particularly well, but the Mandarin. Where you think the Mandarin is this total bad guy, and it turns out, no, that's just a front. That's an actor that we hired to play a role. I think in this particular movie that Kevin Spacey's character, Verbal, is Keyser Soze. I think that's what we're meant to think, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with stopping right there and going, yep, that's the way it is.
Okay, well, yeah, that's great, but until I look at it more and discuss it further with others who have seen this movie, and I'm going to say that there is a slight possibility that there is that little nuance. Unless the director comes to me and says, no, it's him. It's like, oh, okay, well, it was interesting to think about. Talk about movies that did it like that. Avengers was one that's another one I was thinking. It's like where you think Loki is the bad guy, but it really turns out, no, he's the lackey. Somebody else is pulling
he's
the
one having his own strings pulled. Yeah.
And that was the thing with The Empire Strikes Back, where Darth Vader was the baddie, but no, he's got a boss too. He's got the Emperor. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And actually, speaking of Marvel, did you catch the Marvel reference in this movie? Not MCU Marvel, but a Marvel reference.
Oh, yes. In fact, it was in my notes. If you're talking about the reference to Jack McGee.
Yeah, the reporter
Don't
from The
make me
Incredible
angry,
Hulk.
Mr. McGee. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. Yeah, no, I specifically wrote that down. It's a line in my notes.
So did I.
And not from the movie The Incredible Hulk, but from the television series
television
starring
show.
Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno.
Some classic Marvel stuff right there.
I remember watching that when I was a kid. I lived in Colorado for a few years, or for a few months actually, and we didn't have cable, but we did have over-the-air antenna. We had a 12-inch black and white, my brother and I did, and we would... that was must-see TV. We would freaking, clear our time, like, it's 7 o'clock, we gotta watch this. Get the coat hanger, you're over here. Get the antenna, get the tinfoil. Good times.
Good times. Yeah, I always remember the two wire, the flat ribbon antenna wire. It had 2 copper wires on each end, and it was just and you had to
and there's like maybe
wrap them around a
half
screw
inch.
On some screws in the back of the television. Or sometimes they had they had the attachment. It was like a little 2-pronged fork that you slid under the screw.
Yep.
Oh, those were the days.
Yeah, and if those weren't available, the U clips or whatever, you just strip the wire and wrap it around the screw. Oh yeah, good times. Good times. Kids today will never understand.
Kids today will never understand cholera. We had it.
What are you doing? Oh God. Anyway, one of the things that I did notice this time around was the connection between Verbal and Keaton, and I knew about it, but it was so interesting the way that long con was played by Verbal when they were in jail. He was in jail with Keaton. That's how they knew each other. For some, minor thing or whatnot. It was like 6 months earlier or something. How long of a con do you have to play to get those people together? The whole scheming, plotting skill, I guess, that was displayed to get Keaton in there. And it wasn't until the end of the movie that you it was the end of the movie, but
towards the end.
Yeah, where you realize all these people were brought together for a specific purpose. You got the entrance guy, you've got the weapons guy, you've got the skill guy, you've got the knowledge guy. Each one of them brings something to the plate, and it's interesting because they don't really explain it, but I suppose in criminal circles you kind of know, like, oh yeah, I got a door guy, I got a driver, yeah, whatever, and you kind of find out by reputation who's who and who needs to be in the mix. And then the interplay of personalities, so Stephen Baldwin's character and Benicio del Toro's character, they're partners. So you're not getting one without the other, so you just bring them both in. And, that's how you round up the usual suspects. And to steer that, Keyser Soze's organization had to go either into the department, or he had to know that this was a thing that they could all be tied together to, that by surreptitiously planting rumors within the street organization, within criminals on the street or whatnot, and getting all of those people together. The level of planning that had to have been displayed is pretty impressive. It's kind of like going back to the Star Wars thing that you were talking about, where the Emperor, where Chancellor Palpatine orchestrates this entire war thing so he could get Anakin Skywalker as his apprentice. Like killing millions of people, blah, blah, blah. Soon I will have a more powerful apprentice. Like, oh.
Well,
so this whole war thing was just to get him there.
Well, to get him and control of the galaxy. I mean, it wasn't just to
there's
have
that
an apprentice, too. But, the thing, you're mentioning all this or anything, it's like, what, does this remind you of another Kevin Spacey character who played the long game?
Which one are you talking about?
John Doe.
Oh, yeah. No, we've already talked about that. Yeah,
we have. It's like, somebody who, because he's like taking one picture a day of the sloth victim for a whole year. and then to have the cops show up 1 year to the day.
And that's something that I think Kevin Spacey has done well in a lot of the movies that I've seen, is been able to show that, I guess, intensity of someone that would be able to plot something like that over a long period of time. It goes to appreciating the acting skills, but again, to sort of bring it back around to what we talked about at the beginning, you know, knowing what we know now, you're like, oh, you dirty son of a bitch. Could you have just been an actor and not raped young men? Damn it. Again, I don't want to beat that horse because I think, you know, we've already killed it to death.
Yeah.
But it does make it complicated to figure out whether or not you appreciate a movie.
Okay, well, here's I think it's a good time to segue into something else. And, you know, a great movie. Everything, one of those movies that everyone just has nothing but great things to say about it, whether you're being pretentious or you're genuine.
That's not true.
You at least...
Yeah, Roger Ebert did not like this movie.
Oh, well, okay. But see, that's the thing. Roger Ebert was probably vilified for that opinion. You know, it's like, how dare you? You know, it's like...
Yeah.
Was there any aspect of this movie that you didn't like? Or just something that you thought, yeah, you know, maybe it could have done without this or that?
I don't think there's anything that really jumps out at me. It was such a well-made movie, in my opinion, that I would have to specifically go in looking for things that I didn't like.
Well, again, for me, it wasn't that I was looking for things, but it's just little subtleties, blemishes, so to say. You know, it's just like, pardon the analogy, it's like watching the same porno for a second time, or maybe even a third time, and then realizing, wow, there's a pimple there. You know, it's like so unimportant. You don't even focus on it. But then,
okay, that's an interesting analogy.
And the pimple in this case, for this movie though, it's like the thing that I spotted. And again, people are gonna be like, "Really, you spotted that?" And I will be the first to admit these are nothing things, little blemishes that you probably don't even look at. But there was a lot of character type stereotypes.
Oh,
the cops and the criminals smoking, the Baldwin guy chewing on a toothpick. It's just like, you know, it just seemed like to me really cheap Halloween costumes. You know, I want to, you know, I gotta make this image that I'm a bad guy, so I'm gonna be chewing on the toothpick, you know, and we're all gonna be smoking cigarettes, or I'm the stressed out cop smoking a cigarette, and the FBI guy with the cigar going into the hospital, sir, you can't smoke, and he just walks in anyways. It's just, really, do we still do that?
Well, not anymore.
Yeah, well, I know not anymore. I mean, not even in the 90s did I even see that, you know, even before I worked in hospitals and whatnot, you know, it's just...
Yeah, especially where there's oxygen present, like, yeah.
You know, and that's the thing, I mean, even, like it says, even cops who are on the streets and they're gritty and you know, it's like they got a no-nonsense attitude, they gotta know that walking into a hospital with a frickin' lit cigar is not okay.
Yeah, I will say, and I know what you're talking about, and I do remember those scenes, and I did kind of think, all right, whatever.
Well, again, and I'd be the first to admit, ultimately, not important. But, you know, we are talking about looking at details. These are movies we've watched over and over again. Yeah, and so I'm going to talk about it. It's a little thing. To me, that's the blemish.
I agree, but like you said, it's not something that takes away from the overall enjoyment of the movie.
Not entirely, no. It's something I'll roll my eyes at. You know, it's like, really, do the stereotypical cop have to be the one that ignores the doctor saying, don't bring that cigar in there? Because, I mean, I've seen it done so many times in far worse movies.
Yeah.
And it's just like, really, you know, this movie was so good, you know, you could have done without that. And I still would have believed that the FBI guy was a tough, no-nonsense FBI guy. I didn't need to see that to...
I agree, and I was just about to say, I think that whole scene was to show, rather than let you figure out that he's... you know, on a mission. I got to do this thing. This is the most important thing I can be doing. I can't be bothered with your
rules,
inane little rules.
Yeah, I'm a cop. I'm here to uphold the law, but screw your rules. I'm bringing a cigarette or a cigar into a hospital.
Yeah. One of the things that I did notice that also, again, if you're familiar with it, could clue you in that Verbal Kint is Keyser Soze. And this is a very minor thing, but I think it was done intentionally because it's just not the way most people hold their cigarettes. But if you look at the way Kevin Spacey holds his cigarette, it's from the underside, and that's a little more of a European way of holding cigarettes, particularly Eastern European, at least from my understanding. And that, again, is a subtle thing that lends credibility to the idea that verbal is Keyser Soze. If you recall, and I think it was maybe Inglourious Bastards, there was a movie, I forget which one it was, but it was set in World War II, and they were going into a bar, and they ended up killing people. Yeah, where they used, where they held up 2 fingers and a thumb instead of 3 fingers because that's the European way of doing it. And they're like, oh, they held up 3. They're American spies, and they killed them or whatnot.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Gestapo guy or Gestapo-like guy noticed that, when he said, I want 3 beers, he held up 3 fingers instead of the 2 fingers and the thumb, which is what they do in Germany. And that actually, that is played in a number of movies, especially spy thrillers, where, the little tiny subtleties is what gave away the spy or, the bad guy. I think it was a movie called The Big Red One about, it was a World War II movie as well. Mm-hmm. And it was a German infiltrator pretending to be an American officer. And it was a scene, they're all sitting at the table having dinner, and this lady, part of the house staff or whatever, she walks up to this American officer, shoots him in the head. And everyone's like, what the hell? And she's like, he was a German spy. And they're like, how do you know? And everything. Because he was eating with his fork facing downwards. Whereas Americans use their fork like a spoon. They scoop and everything. Whereas Europeans tend to stab downward, and it's subtle little things like that. You see that in a lot of movies, and it's fun.
I do like little details like that, though, because it does give you an insight into different cultures. And I've been to Europe, and I've seen European people smoking, and depending on the situation, they will hold their cigarettes that way. So for me, it was kind of when I was like, oh, yeah, I've actually seen that before. Okay, that makes sense. But for other people, it might be just one of those little weird affectations that the character has, and you don't really notice it. It's not really important. But again, if you know, you know, and if you don't, it's not that important.
That's the beautiful thing, too, in a lot of movies. It's like they'll put something that obvious. And for us Americans who are not very well-traveled and we don't know... I say, we generally don't know about other cultures and other peoples from around this planet. Yeah, it'll go over our heads and we won't notice, but you'll have that one person who either is familiar with European customs or is from that European country. It'll be like, oh, hey, he might see it a little sooner. Mm-hmm. It's like, for the movie The Thing? The guy gives away the plot in the first 5 minutes of the movie. The guy who's chasing the dog. He says, that's not a dog, it's a thing, But he's saying it in Norwegian, so unless you so unless you spoke the language, it was like, okay, he's saying something, but I don't know. But again, nuances, little subtle things. It's the brushstrokes, and again, that goes to me just admiring just what goes into making a movie or a scene. It's amazing that movies get made at all. To me.
Yeah, and it's very clear that someone sat down and thought this out. And I think they did a great job. So with that, I've covered everything in my notes. Did you want to add anything else? Do you want to keep talking, or?
Well, there was, just a thing like earlier when I talked about movie pretentiousness and everything. It's like a lot of people will say that this was a great movie. I guess I was gonna somewhere in there. I was gonna try to add the question is like, how much of this do you think is really because of the movie's merits, and how much of it was the marketing or the hype? I mean, I'm leaning towards a lot of it. It was the craft of this movie, and that's what makes it memorable.
I'm leaning towards the craft as well because I don't remember this movie getting a lot of press.
Well, it's weird because I guess you and I have different memories. I do remember it getting. I remember a lot of critics and a lot of commercials and everything, and people talking about it a lot, saying this was such a great movie. What do they call that? It's just the unexpected hit.
Well, but that was after the fact, and that's kind of where I'm coming from. I don't remember when this was in the theater hearing anything more about it than maybe the random commercial on television.
Do you think this will be a memorable movie for a long time to come?
Well, we're talking about it 33 or 23 years later, so yeah.
Well, because that's the thing. I mean, it's like I mean, especially movies, just because one wins an Academy Award or whatever doesn't necessarily mean people are going to remember it as much as, say, like another movie. You know, I mean, like what comes to mind always is that, you know, Gandhi beat E.T. for the Best Picture Award, but not too many people, I mean, people remember it, but not too many people talk about Gandhi in the same way they talk about E.T.
Yeah, I don't think this movie has that same issue. I think it has weaseled its way into our cultural psyche as a movie that is held in high regard. It's not like Tombstone, again, where there's a lot of quotes coming out of it. It's not like Casablanca, which also refers to The Usual Suspects. But that's, neither here nor there.
Which is funnier. Yeah, it refers to, our first episode, which had a reference to Round Up the Usual Suspects.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this movie will last for some time as a movie that people respect. And I think it's just going to stay right about where it is as a movie that's...
So would you call this a timeless movie?
Yeah, that's interesting because aside from the cars in the movie, there's nothing in it that really dates it to a specific era. I think the story itself could be told in any age, so I think there's a certain timelessness to it.
Okay.
You?
I think generally it would. I mean, there isn't a whole lot of things. They don't talk about a lot of issues that could be linked to a certain time, like certain social issues. However, I will say one thing. There was the scene when they rob the corrupt police officers and steal the smugglers' jewels, and it got me thinking. It's like, wow, in the 90s when this was made, the whole idea of police brutality and police accountability wasn't the thing yet. It was something other people complained about because they were probably criminals anyways. It wasn't an issue
yeah,
that
sorry,
we're looking.
I shouldn't laugh, but
no,
yeah.
but you get what I'm saying though. Nowadays it's like, well, they've been doing this a while, so it's just a lot of them could be bad. So you see that scene and they're saying that oh yeah, a bunch of people went down because they exposed them in their own special way and everything like that. And to me that was the only issue that could probably be. Like, some people could probably look at this as like, wow, did they make that in the 2018s or, the 2010s or whatever, because, police accountability was a big issue back then, It's like, no, this was 1995, before that was an issue. Oh, okay,
Okay, so I want to address that real quick. The movie that we did on our last episode, Tombstone, was about a law enforcement officer, Wyatt Earp. And we discussed the fact that he had issues. He was a scoundrel, but he enforced the law, and he, had a lot to do with cleaning up the West. Fast forward to 1995, when this movie was made. That's 100 years, give or take. Okay. Some change. I think Tombstone was set in 1870, so it's 120 years. And then you look at all of the real-world movies and conversations and entertainment that were done between those 2 points, and we have always made movies that involved corrupt cops. Every decade has had a number of movies where cops have been the bad guys. So it's not new, it's just more visible. We've always questioned the authority of the police. We've always questioned whether or not the police are doing things the right way. That's the whole reason we have Miranda rights, is because somebody said they're not doing the right thing. If you watch Law and Order, which was created in the 90s in this same era, and you see Lenny Briscoe talking about the 60s when, that's when we used to go down to the West End Grill, and that's where we would grill the suspects and, beat the crap out of them. So this is not new. It's more about the visibility of it and the fact that it can be easily posted and passed around the world, in the blink of an eye.
It's that phrase that was going around on social media where it's like it's police corruption and brutality isn't becoming more prevalent, it's just becoming more obvious. I was going to say, though, I will have to kind of disagree with you on that as far as movies are concerned, that it's always been there. I mean, it's a relatively recent phenomenon of showing police in less than a pristine light, because they did have the Hays Codes in the early days of film, where you were not allowed to portray police officers in a bad light, and you're not allowed to portray the law ever being defeated.
Yes, I will agree with you on that.
Yeah, it wasn't until
but
about
the
60s
existence
and 70s
of it,
that
and that's when they started. Yeah,
that's where you had
and
Serpico and
right, Dirty Harry, and some a little more. A little more questionable morality within your police officers.
Yeah.
The protect and serve at all costs sort of thing. But going back to like the real world, and that was kind of where I was leaning, was even so, in the real world, you still had that stuff going on. And you look at the stuff in the 60s, about the looking up the flower children and the sit-ins and the police brutality that occurred there. You look at the civil rights marches and that sort of thing. There were cops that were intentionally planting evidence to frame, some of the key people in these organizations. In the 50s, and I know this is a movie, so it's a dramatization, but if you look at L.A. Confidential, that was corrupt cops in the 50s, but I'll guarantee you that there were bad cops in the 50s.
Oh, yeah, well, if you read about the racial riots that occurred in Los Angeles during those times, in the 50s and the early 60s and everything, and a lot of it, a lot of the epicenters were the things that police officers were doing to minorities.
So, now what I'm going to say, and this might not be, I don't know if I want to say popular, but herein lies the rub. You could have 5% of the police population be bad, and that is a tremendously large number. But that also means that there are 95% that are not. So I will say, my opinion, the vast majority of police officers are good people trying to do a job. Some of them are better, some of them are worse, but they're trying to do the best they can. But it is the somewhat small number, comparatively speaking, again, by scale, that are driving this, which is not justification for their actions, nor is it permission for them to do that. Not that I could give them permission, but it is the balance of saying not all cops are bad. It's a small amount of them doing the bad thing. So let's take Kevin Spacey, for example. And again, this is kind of a weird analogy, so follow me through on this. Of the 60 people that are credited on IMDb for being in this movie, one is being accused of indecent liberties with a minor. Does that mean that all of them are bad?
I will answer that with something that you said on this podcast earlier, where you said that they knew about it, but they kept going.
And that's a part of it. Yes, there are some cops that know these things are going on, but there is a certain part of them like, well, I can't do anything about it, because does that make you a part of it? Makes you a part of the problem, but that doesn't make you the problem.
It makes you implicit. Because
complicit, I believe, is the word you're looking for.
Yeah, but the point being is that if I see somebody, and not even involving a police officer, if I see somebody getting beat up or robbed or assaulted, whatever you want to say, and I just look the other way and just nothing I can do about it. No, I'm not expected to go rush in or whatever, but at least say something, do something. I mean, we're telling the public, you see something, say something. Why are we not holding that same standard to people who work in the department? And yeah, there are people who just go in and they're trying to do the best that they can and everything like that. But you know what? If you got this many, if 95% of them are not saying a single thing and saying, you know what, I've seen this happen, that's a problem, and it continues. I have a very hard time swallowing that, they're not all bad, Yeah, there's a few good ones that come out and say, yeah, I blew the whistle on them, and guess what? I got fired or I got ousted. Because you saw that happen, and you brought up the movie LA Confidential, where he said, no, I saw this, it was wrong, I'm going to do something about it, and everybody ostracized him. He was kicked out, so to say, of the inner circles of the police department, and nobody wanted to work with him. And I hear those stories a lot, and I see the feel-good stories where the one guy, he helps a baby who's sick, or he saves a drowning kid, or anything, and I applaud that. Good on you. You're a good human being. But until I see more of a systemic solution to what is a systemic problem, because the phrase is like, it's just a few bad apples. Well, we've had the older phrase is a bad apple spoils the bunch.
And that goes to my original point, where it is the one piece that makes the rest look bad. If you take out that bad apple and show somebody the rest of it, they're like, oh, yeah, that's not so bad. So, and the other piece, and I don't want to go too much further down this road. Something you said kind of frustrated me just a little bit. So, if we take all of those people who haven't said anything, one, we don't know who's reported what to internal affairs. Okay, we don't. Two, it's a press thing. And I'm not blaming the press because it is a thing that happens.
See, that's
what I'm saying is,
me.
if it's newsworthy, then it gets covered. And more often than not, somebody doing the right thing doesn't get covered. So we see what we see, and that colors our perceptions.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like, if it was a line in the Matrix. We don't care how it works as long as it works. And if something works, yeah, you don't see it. You don't know the inner workings of things, and that's the thing. Right now, the system doesn't work, and that's why people are complaining. We're looking, because of course we see the bad ones. Of course we see that, because if I'm in a submarine and I see a leaking valve, I'm not going to go, it's like, hey, there are 3,000 other valves in this submarine that are working.
And I expect you to fix that valve.
Yeah, we're going to fix that valve.
No, I agree.
Hey, guys, why are you focusing on that one valve that's spewing seawater?
Yeah, look at the 9,300 other ones that are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. But again, the analogy is apt, and I do respect that. There is an extreme view where people will take the one example, and there's more than one, but I'm just saying that for the sake of the conversation, that will take the bad examples and say that represents every single one of them, and that's wrong. That's my point. I'm not saying that there aren't bad cops and that that those bad cops don't need to be dealt with, through the legal system, or that there aren't systemic issues within certain organizations that, like the police. I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that there aren't problems. By saying that there are good examples means that we have to focus on the good examples so that we can empower them to correct the system, because it's not like you're just going to fire every single police officer in the country and hire new ones. You're just not.
Well, the two things to say to that. One, this is kind of a societal thing, where we seem to be okay with applying that rhetoric to other groupings of people. I've seen people say, well, we can't let refugees in because what if one of them was a grape that could kill you? Are you going to allow the bunch into your kitchen? Or Muslims? Or immigrants? It's just like, we have no problem grouping those people together and saying, yeah, well, we just don't know. But there's a double standard when it comes to, well, there's good police officers, so we'll just have to default to that they're good until they're proven otherwise. The other thing I have a problem with is that, you talk about us, we just can't fire all of them. But the thing is like, I don't know, too many stories out there where even the one that is doing wrong just can't seem to get fired. Or he gets put on paid leave, comes back, kills somebody again, and he's like, oh yeah, he has this record of, doing this. Why is that a thing? It's like, and again, I don't have to, and it's like, I know people say that I do, but I don't say that they're all bad. I say, no, that guy is bad. That guy somehow still has a job.
And I know that. I feel the same way, because the examples that you brought up about the grape and the refugees, I'm like, well, that is the stupidest analogy I've ever heard in my entire life.
I know.
Because, if that were the case, then there are 328 million grapes in this country. One of them must be bad. We should probably kill everyone. It's a stupid analogy, and I know you recognize that because you were pointing out that it was. I guess my point is, and like I said, I don't want to spend too much more time on this. I guess my point is that you and I recognize, I think, that we can point at that one bad cop and say that's a bad cop. And we can also recognize that there are good cops. Just as there are probably bad paramedics.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
There are good paramedics. And you, as a paramedic, don't want to go out into the world and have people look at you and go, well, I had a bad experience with a paramedic one time. I want to judge you based on that. You suck at this. Like, whoa, well, hey.
As I say, that's the thing, though, in my line of work, though, when there's a bad paramedic, we say so. We've always said, it's like, this guy sucks, man. Your best advice, don't call 911 because this guy's going to be the one to show up at your house. And the other point is that we distance ourselves from him because he wears the same uniform. We know that his screw-ups make the rest of us look bad. It ruins the trust. And
absolutely.
And that's the other thing I don't see from the other side of it is that, hey, you wear the same uniform. You act like this, it makes us all look bad.
But and again, we're still here. We're still going down this rabbit hole. Damn it.
It happens.
It's true. But the other piece of it is, how do we know they didn't? We only see what we see in the news. So unless you're specifically there and embedded in that story, you don't know every single detail.
You're right.
That's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to say that, again, that the argument is wrong. I'm just saying that we don't live in a black and white world. There's a lot more nuance that we don't see.
And then just to say, like, the final point is, like, you're absolutely right. I don't see everything, but all I know is where the leaks are, and we're going to focus on the leaks. And right now, yeah, there's innocent people that are either dead or in the hospital. Those are the leaks.
Yeah, and
that's what I'm going to focus
and those leaks need to be fixed. And I totally agree with you. So, mine was more of a philosophical point as opposed to saying, no, just because they're good. See, and again, the logic works in reverse. They're not all bad, but they're not all good.
Yeah.
It's nuance.
So, and then it's like, yeah, to bring it round robin, like I said, in the movie, in that particular scene, they got the right ones.
Yes. Well, did they? I mean, the guy walked into a hospital with a lit cigar.
Well, no, I'm talking about the scene where they got the corrupt ones.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. The New York, the New York taxi.
Yeah,
there
they called them the New York taxi,
yeah.
So yeah.
But, okay. And there was actually one thing that I think I've discussed this before, but movies give us this really weird time frame. But one of the things this movie actually did was take place over, theoretically, the 2 hours that they were having the conversation. So while you see all of the flashbacks, they say he's got to be out on bail within 2 hours. And it was about 2 hours, so that was kind of neat. I did think that was cool.
That was cool.
And just a weird Navy thing. When they were on the ship and they had the 8-foot fire nozzle applicators hanging on the bulkheads, I giggle when I see stuff like that. It kind of, I look at it and go, oh, hey, I remember those.
Yeah, that was nostalgia.
So, yeah, yep. So, did you have anything you wanted to add, or I think...
No, that's pretty much got everything that I took notes on, so...
Yeah, so where does this belong on your shelf?
I hate to say this is a general population movie. It's a good movie or anything, but it doesn't really hold anything special in my heart. It's just something that I have in the library. Okay.
I will put this at the back end of the top shelf, maybe leading edge of the second shelf. It's a really good movie. It's incredibly well acted. It's incredibly well put together. There are better movies. I think it's an excellent movie overall. So, There you go.
So,
all right. You were going to say?
Viewer's pick.
Yeah, we are on episode 29, which means that our next episode is 30, and that gives us, puts us on a different spreadsheet, on a different Magic Random movie button list. And we've received 6 total requests to cover. Star Wars The Last Jedi, John Wick, Deadpool, Blade Runner 2049, The Matrix, and Galaxy Quest. So our random listener request is going to be one of those 6. And with that, I will push the button.
Blade Runner 2049.
Blade Runner 2049. There we go.
Nice. All right. Get ready for a long conversation on that one.
Yeah, we'll clear your schedule. Yeah. So. All right. So to our listeners, once again, we ask for your feedback. And you can reach us at our Facebook page primarily. You can also send us email at wrios2016mr@gmail.com. You can also include an audio file. We will play it during the episode. And with that, Dan, what is your movie-related goodbye this episode?
And like that, he's gone.
All right, we'll see you all in 2 weeks with Blade Runner 2049.